I don't know. Oh, take them if they're filled out. Jeremy, are those on your guys'
Los Angeles City Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, April 9th, 9:30.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Soboroff, Decker, Bonner. But they're present and we have a quorum.
Do we have any commissioner comments on items number 1A, B, or C, which are the consent agenda items? Do you have any public comments on items 1A, B, or C?
Yes, so we have one card on A, one card on B, and two on C.
Okay.
And Mr. Herman on all three, and Mr. Novick on 1C.
Okay.
Mr. Herman on 1A.
Good morning to you, Mr. Soboroff. Good morning, Ms. Decker. Good morning, Mr. Bonner. The hell with you, Mr. T. Fanning. Because today's situation is dealing with cadets, a program that was started by the so-called Explorer, and then it fell into the hands of the cadets. And we welcome cadets to these programs because we find them engaging in a policy and practice by the Los Angeles Police Department to engage in lunacies that pertain to why our cadet program is set forth. Well, because I am the legislative body of the Brown Act, let me inform you why. Because we have Robert Kane with a 15-year-old, we have Ken Collard with another.
President, way off topic. You know, this is about
Oh yeah, you're right. Look, youth, welfare, and educational
stay on
funds.
topic, please.
He didn't stop it.
Hello? Oh, there you go. Just, there we go. So, ladies and gentlemen of the quorum, we have observed that the LAPD community with our cadet program has been very successful, although there were a few incidents that were inappropriate. And we have to remind ourselves that these programs are for the community. They're not for you to engage in inappropriate utilization of recreational activities.
Let's go to B now.
Well, I got 18 seconds, sir.
You're off topic.
So you're gonna unconstitutionally violate my rights because you don't let me finish my 2 minutes, just 2 minutes?
1B.
1B, bitch. Department report dated April 3rd regarding the Los Angeles LLC, otherwise known as AKA let me pay you on the backside for a favor on the other side. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, the Dodgers have participated in giving this department money that they don't need. You see, they're already funded by grants and bonds by DOJ, for the record. And so far, the history behind the department's report is inadequate and biased because it results in the fact and manner as other gentlemen here and other women have spoken. They want to see an itemized list of how this money is being utilized in the effort for recreational activities. Is it going to motel expenses? Is it going to buying gifts, condoms, and whatever facilities need for activities? This is regarding the Dodgers' food and activities for events. Now, I'm not blind. I too, like the rest of you, walk around this big city, and I know how we spend our money. Foolishly, lavishly, and our lifestyles reflect
Okay,
that.
let's go to item number C now,
I
which
got
is,
14 seconds.
no, you don't, relative to a monetary
You're not gonna
donation
observe the
regarding
Bailey Keene Act?
supporters of law enforcement. You want to speak on C?
C for cunt. Now
Off
that,
topic?
for the sum amount of $1,837.30. Am I off topic, Mr. Carlos? Mr. Attorney, will you weigh in and tell me if I'm off topic?
That's it, last stuff, you're done. Okay.
I'm shooting
So who else is
targets.
on C? Who else is-
We have Mr. Novak.
Okay, so on, let's have a motion for approval of items 1A and 1B. For the second? All second, all in favor? Anyone opposed? 1C, Mr. Novak.
Yeah, 1C is a grant to purchase targets to officers to maximize their shooting accuracy and effectiveness. I don't think you should be trying to maximize the shooting accuracy and effectiveness of the officers. I think you should be trying to stop the officers from shooting. When they shot Bashari Mack inside the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall, they were firing wildly several times and scaring people in the mall and breaking store windows, but then they fired their 2 kill shots very accurately and effectively that you found out of policy. So I think that the problem is not how effective they are in their shooting. The problem is they're shooting too often and they're killing too often. And I want to say that on your agenda you have 2A, 1, 2, and 3.
No,
Those
we're
are
on
separate
1C,
agenda
we're on
items.
1C now.
Yeah, I understand that, but they refused to accept my cards for 2A, 1, 2, and 3. They just had to cross out the numbers. If they're separate agenda items, they have separate public comment periods.
That's
And I
right.
want you to accept my cards for 2A, 1, 2, and 3.
That's
Just
right,
like you
you're
do
right.
when you have 5A, 1, 2, and 3, and I have commented each separate shooting by officer-involved shootings of animals and people in the city.
Let's get
So
back to
Please
1C.
direct the officer to accept the cards for
Let's get back to
2A,
1C.
1. That's 1C. I think you should refuse to accept this money, and you should come up with policies that stop your officers from shooting effectively.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion for approval on 1C. Second? All second? All in favor? Anyone opposed?
So what are you going to do about those 3 separate
Let's go to
items?
2A. We'll take care of it.
Those are 3 different items.
Go to 1.
We're not.
They're not one item.
We want to get started or not?
Mr. President, for
Not the question. We want you to break out the items.
Go ahead.
they are identified the way they are because there's a separate action required on each of the reports, but it's taken as a total item. All of the items are listed under the one agenda item.
Why?
If you need further clarification, you can get that from the city attorney.
Okay, let him talk then.
Please
City attorney,
please
weigh
stop
in.
disrupting the meeting
Weigh
so we
in,
can
city
go ahead.
attorney.
No, because we'll go ahead once you explain why. Attorney, regarding why,
That's
these
the
are not
last
3
one.
separate
You've been
items.
disrupting the meeting, and I'm going to ask you to stop.
You disrupted me.
Told us to seek clarification from the city attorney.
Is the city
Right,
attorney
you're
present?
very clear.
We did.
Is the city
Okay,
attorney
so
present? Can I speak with
let's
them?
start with the Inspector General on the report.
Great.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, everyone, staff, chief. As you may recall, at the March 12th meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners, OIG presented its review of selected LAPD data-driven policing strategies. During
Shut
that
it the
meeting,
fuck
we
down!
announced the public was invited to provide commentary on the OIG report for a 2-week period after that meeting for further consideration by the Police Commission. I'd like to sort of briefly summarize for you the commentary that was received during that time period. OIG received a total of 819 email responses from individuals, as well as 2 written responses from organizations. Starting with the emails, out of the 819, 99% of them contained identical or nearly identical text, and I'll get into that a little more in just a moment.
That doesn't matter.
1% contained individualized, not identical written context, and 1 was blank, did not contain any material. Although no location was required or anything else was required for submission, a number of these submissions did include indications of where they originated from. Just over a third originated there from Los Angeles. 58% originated from somewhere else in the state of California. 7% were from outside of California, and we did have quite a few other states across the country, and just a small number did not indicate any origin. With to the two responses submitted by organizations. One was from the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition and from the ACLU of Southern California. Speaking generally, all the responses that are described so far received by the OIG during the response period range in content from expressing concern over the use of predictive policing to calling for an end to predictive policing and the laser and predpol program specifically.
100%.
Shut it down!
None of the responses received by OIG expressed support for predictive policing during the designated
Zero.
response period.
Zero.
For 99% of the response. The responses received in the packet for in case it's helpful, be reflective of some of the sentiments that we were seeing. I'd like to read off to you the sort of identical or nearly identical language that received in 99% responses. It's fairly brief. Dear Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners, I'm writing to urge you to end both laser and predpol programs. OIG's audit has highlighted some glaring problems with both programs that can't be addressed with simple reforms. For close to a decade, LAPD has used predictive policing tools in order to predict where crime will happen and who will commit the crime. These programs have not made our communities safer. They reinforce racist policing practices that are criminalizing people of color, youth, and poor people in Los Angeles. The research that we released on these programs, expensive programs, could instead be redirected to fund initiatives that promote real public safety, employment, education, public housing, health centers, and youth development. I urge you to please end predictive policing in Los Angeles. And then lastly, to tell you, there were a number of emails that included additional language beyond that identical language. For example, in my years living in LA, I've only witnessed the police harming communities. I've watched the police harm my neighbor with mental illness. I've watched them harass my homeless neighbors day in, day out. Another one says, I also urge you to end the business relationship between UCLA, LAPD, and Predpol Inc. LAPD sends the wrong message when we use public funds for secret programs and disguise it with quote-unquote science in order to legitimize these programs. And lastly, I'll give two examples of emails that did not contain that same identical language in 99%. They contain their own language. I'll just give you a flavor of two of those. One says, end the laser and predpol programs, stop criminalizing being black or poor. What we need is programs that will help Angelenos, not make their lives worse. And second, I'm an anthropology student at UCLA, a pediatric physician, and my research area is services for people with serious mental illness in LA, which includes many interactions with law enforcement. Data-driven policing is not a neutral or quote-unquote scientific approach to policing. Crime intervention via patrol, which is a framework for data-driven policing, is like a doctor patrolling a neighborhood waiting for a heart attack. It does not work. That was, again, inside the 2-week response period that was designated for this after our report. Outside of the responses sent to OIG during that period, the Commission, of course, heard public comment during the March 12th meeting. There will be further public comment today, I imagine. I was made aware of approximately 4 additional communications from individuals indicating affiliation with either UCLA or Columbia University. OIG received a number of emails outside the response period as well. All of those sort of expressed similar concerns to the ones I've raised, with one exception. There was one message we received outside the response period which advocated for continuation of laser and predpol as tools to continue reducing crime in Los Angeles. That, I hope, is a brief summary of the public comments that were received in the 2-week designated period and slightly beyond. And I'll be happy to take any further questions, but again, the materials are all available to you as part of the agenda.
Shut it down!
Shut it down!
So if we're gonna have disruption in the meeting, then what we'll do is we will. So please don't disrupt the meeting. We'd like to hear from the department and the chief now. And then we'll go to commissioner questions and then we'll go to public.
Thank you, Commissioner Silverado. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Bob Arcos, the Director of the Office of Operations. The Chief has also charged me with the direct oversight of precision policing as we move forward. With me is Commander George Rodriguez, Assistant to the Director of the Office of Operations. We've submitted our responsive report to the Office of the Inspector General and have endeavored to address each of the stated objectives identified by the Office of the Inspector General. We have identified there are inconsistencies that were in part due to a decentralized model of oversight of the program and a lack of clear guidelines. We have begun to prepare for the transition from laser to precision policing, which will no longer use on-finger bulletins and/or anchor points. As an organization, the department will continue to seek opportunities to improve our service delivery and the impact our time fighting efforts are having in the community. Since data-driven strategies are still an emerging field, the development and implementation of the new technologies will further refine their use and provide opportunities to obtain independent evaluations of the efficacy and impact of each data-driven policing programs.
Could you turn the volume up because we can't hear very well?
And with that, we're available for questions, Commissioner.
Chief, will you, before we begin the commissioner questions, will you give a statement, your thought about what we are not going to continue to do, what we are going to change, and what we are going to continue to do in relation to each of those?
Who is we?
Commissioners, thank you. Good morning. The department's response, as briefly outlined by Chief Arcos, let me just take a more broader framing of this. First and foremost is our efforts in applying police resources in Los Angeles is meant to do it in a manner and strategies that are viewed as fair, the rational, that we take advantage of systems and data and the value of research, that as we look to the public to build trust, that we use strategies, and when challenges to those strategies exist, that we look at them cleanly to explore the basis for those challenges and whether adjustments should be made. This is an evolution of policing that has existed during my entire time with LAPD, and LAPD is seen not just here, but across the country as an agency willing to learn, that is engaged in efforts to use its finite resources to smartly in a manner that provides for public safety and has achieved results. Today, as a department and as a city and as a region, we are experiencing some of our lowest levels in crime, both property as well as violent crime. Yet, there are...
So we're going to fire some cops, lay them off, we don't need them?
And as we look at our policing resources, we will continue to seek strategies and explore ideas about how to smartly go about using those resources in a manner that builds trust, that recognizes bias, that understands community concerns relative to the past of policing, which may in the past exercise those biases more arbitrarily. And I'm committed in what we stated in this report is a framework of moving forward that does a couple things. We're going to stop using, as we did, as I initiated last August, we will no longer use chronic offender bulletin. The process, while I understand in the laser program, and understand the research as well as the methodology and the design outcome or the desired outcome, our experience over the years found the process of systematically and regularly identifying individuals who, based on their prior criminal arrests, convictions, and activities, suggested that they would be or could be individuals re-engaging in acts of, particularly violent acts, in a neighborhood or in an area of
No redemption, no rehabilitation.
was worthy of exploring.
One little mistake, you're a criminal for life,
I'm gonna ask you to
according to
stop
the
disrupting the meeting, or I'm gonna have to
LAPD,
recess-
because you're
I'm gonna
black
have to
or
recess the
brown.
meeting. So if you can't stop, then
So the physical process of identifying chronic offenders through the bulletin process, in my view, and our view as a department and senior leadership, did not bear the type of results that, in the face of its criticism, in the face of concerns relative to whether or not the underlying algorithm truly was fair and unbiased, for us to continue going forward. And so this is when those questions arose by the public and by this commission last summer. We took a look. We also looked and reflected upon our own personal experience as leadership of this organization and said, let's cease this. And today, I want to be clear, we're not going to reinstate that. For offender-based strategies, though, it is important for us as we look at crime, our efforts to reduce crime and provide for public safety, is that the role of the offender is a critical area of law enforcement that we cannot ignore, nor does the criminal justice system ignore it, nor does the community ignore it. Identifying how to examine who the offender is and how they interplay in a community safety is something that we will continue to try to strive to find ways that are rational, that are fair, that are defendable to those that we feel that we're preying upon a group or subgroup. Secondly, as to location-based strategies, which is primarily the thread-pole difference. The difference between these two programs is LASER, as was articulated, was primarily focused on violence reduction, particularly street violence, that had locations that were at a hotspot or over-concentration. It wasn't just a randomized, but these were heavy concentrations of street violence. And what was the characteristics of those locations that may facilitate or somehow they found victims being more victimized in those areas, and how could we work with those communities and work with all the stakeholders to improve the resilience of that area so that it would not experience those high levels of violence. That was LASER. LASER also added an offender component, which is that it identifies individuals that we, under the theory, that there were select individuals that were preying upon neighborhoods and using violence in those neighborhoods. And this methodology to identify those offenders based on past criminal conduct and actions in those very same neighborhoods, we did not see the rate, we did not see an effective return on that, and so we will stand that down and have stood it down, and we'll continue to do so.
What does that mean?
On the location aspect, thread-pole, unlike LASER, does not have an offender aspect to it. It has a location of a crime occurring, particularly property crime. And we rely upon our own experience as law enforcement executives and professionals in this department, as well as studied research and evaluations both by universities as well as the Department of Justice, the NIJ, and others that look at BJA, that look systematically at department strategies to reduce crime, working in community settings, in partnerships, and the use of data. And we will continue in using thread-pole in its current configuration with adjustments that have been made, because we found through this study that there were problems with its focus. Specifically, the fact that it involved areas such as police stations, that crime was not occurring at those stations. They were being reported.
Not true.
Tell the people yes, it was.
Not true. You're the biggest thugs in the game.
But if they decide to talk while someone else is talking, that's disrupting the meeting. So
Shut up, you do it all the time.
So if there was to the extent that there was a bias in that, and a miscalculation, those adjustments have been made. But I will fall back to that the organization and policing in general, since the 1980s, has relied upon upon research and its own practical experience, that officers without specific information about underlying instances of crime and disorder in neighborhoods, who are left to simply go about their patrols or in some randomized manner move about with very randomized results. That crime does have a habitual and a pattern sense to it, as does many other human behaviors. And that there is an underlying value of using data systems and smart policing that takes advantage of those human behaviors in an effort to protect the public, in an effort to improve the safety of communities. And at the end of the day, what we have to ensure is that as we go about exploring and using new ideas of this or descriptions of it, is that we do so in a manner that recognizing the community is going to listen to our descriptions. And we have to avoid, we must avoid creation and terms that suggest, that undermine the dignity of an individual, that undermine the dignity or safety or the value of a community. So that's what our commitment is going forward. When we talk about anchor points, moving away from that phraseology, recognizing that while well-intended in the past, that was certainly experiencing crime, that in and of itself is a location that's not an anchor to that community. It's not sinking that community. Hopefully this has brought some context to what we are going to do moving forward. I will close by we will continue to work with all of our communities productively in a manner to identify, if not this, then what? If not location-based strategies, if we cannot look at individuals who are committing crime, then what is your suggestion to protecting people who are being preyed upon?
What about police
Disarming
that
the
commit
police,
crimes?
that's the solution.
Police that murder, that unnecessarily murder,
I'm sorry, sir.
with a lot of
Really
BS
sorry.
excuse.
This is
I
your
fear
last
for my
warning.
life.
You'll have a chance to talk in public comment. Thank you.
So we are willing and wanting and will continue to reach out and deal with, and work with all of our communities to understand alternatives, viable alternatives, rational alternatives that reflect some pragmatic approach in democracies such as ourselves that we find ourselves in. Secondly, is our outreach that has begun to identify in a university footing further research and evaluation of going forward. What is our mechanisms of identifying situational awareness, identifying crime and disorder, and what are and how our strategies that we're currently using, such as the Community Safety Operations Center, such as mission sheets and descriptions of what our actions we want our officers to engage in, patrols we want them to be a part of, how we evaluate that through the CONSTAT process, the accountability loop of that. How do the current model, the framework that we're acting under, what are areas for improvement, what are areas that can be refined, and as we move forward in our efforts to build community trust.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, we'll start with Vice President. Oh, I'm sorry, the chair.
Just the committee. Commissioner Bonner and I. Thank you. Chief, could you just articulate what is this precision policing model, and also when will implementation begin, and at what point do you think you'll begin to see the types of results from this new strategy that would enable you to begin to determine what's working and what's more or less effective?
10 years from now.
So the transition to a phraseology of this process of precision policing, it is a
that some people were put on this goddamn
phrase that is developing its attributes, if you will, as we speak. Not just here in Los Angeles, but across the country. Precision policing strives to identify through data, through awareness and partnerships with communities and stakeholders, how do we go about in a more precise manner, to use the term phrase, in identifying those persons responsible and that should be held accountable for crimes, whether it be property or violence. Also, in a precision sense, what are the strategies in dealing with location and with victimization that can help improve the resiliency to in effect, lower crime? Crime prevention is our primary pursuit. It is not the apprehension of offenders. Prevention of crime is what we strive to do as an organization. Identifying and holding offenders, bring them before the justice system is the responsibility that we have to every victim and to the safety of the community. And it has a deterring effect to further acts of violence, further crimes of opportunity. But it is in this precision policing model that we're evolving to. I'm wishing and I desire for us as an organization to move beyond the at times fair criticism of what Laser and Credible has represented as governing strategies of this organization. And at the same time recognize that we cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater, that policing has a role, a significant role in the safety of a community. And that
What community? The black community?
that policing has no role in our society is a matter that is certainly, as an American, I welcome people to have that debate, but as the chief of this department, and as a responsibility to the 4 million people who live in this city, I am governed by that motto to protect and serve using these values of my right, and we will strive to do that in a manner that has been proven
Integrity? I don't think so.
while recognizing
Respect?
we will be
I don't
forever
think so.
committed to continually improve
Service?
the manner in which we go about policing. And that's not doublespeak. That is meant to suggest to you that we have a fundamental disagreement with members of this audience about whether or not an armed or a law enforcement agency has a role in community safety.
No.
You just don't want to lose your job, that's all.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah, and,
Commissioner, could I just want to add that we've already begun the training with community safety operations centers. We've had two citywide meetings with all of our crime house details, and every area crime house detail and detective commanding officer. And one of the things, again, that we learned from the report was just, again, the lack of consistent application across our 21 areas. We've already put that in place. We were joined by the Office of Special Operations to ensure that we also develop and design a Pacific Metropolitan Division package as well. It's part of it, and it's building up the consistency. And under the leadership of Commander Rodriguez, he's already selected a training cadre that will go to all 21 areas to ensure that we are rolling out precision police exactly across the city as it should be.
Commissioner, in addition to that, this is Commissioner Rodriguez, in addition to that, we have a working group that is putting together a manual that is going to be available to all individuals that are going to be involved, all the CSOCs and our crime analysis details as well. So that way there will be uniformity throughout the entire city as to what is the expectations are, what the processes are going to be, and how they are to deliver that product.
so I just want to thank the members of the community who have brought forward significant concerns about this over several years, and in particular at the hearing that we had and in this public comment process. And it's certainly clear that there are a lot of concerns and fears about the use of this data and
There's a lot of harm.
proactive and suppression-based crime-fighting strategies that the concern is that that's having a disparate impact on certain communities, in particular low-income communities of color. And so that's why this report was important to me, and this process is important to me, is to understand that better. And unfortunately, our ability to understand those impacts has been limited based on the issues that have been raised in terms of consistency of data collection and practice of these strategies. So I really appreciate the department's response. I appreciate the chief's responsiveness to these concerns and willingness to really just stop, put certain things on hold, stop certain programs, and really reevaluate and do things differently going forward.
That's not what's happening.
That's,
It's the same thing.
I really appreciate the leadership that shows and the genuine efforts to respond to community concerns and to improve these programs. Again, sort of in this moment where there's very limited information about what this is going to mean going forward. So I do appreciate the quarterly report back to the full commission. I think that'll be very helpful. The first one, I think, then would be in July. For this subcommittee, I would like to ask that this manual come back in its draft form before it's finalized to the committee, and also that the committee have input into the research design of the external evaluators to make sure that the original questions that we wanted the Inspector General to explore that were not fully answered in this report, those get either addressed in the academic study and or that the Inspector General then prepare a process to evaluate those same questions when these programs are up and running. And so given the uncertainty of where we are right now, I would suggest that in July, when this comes back to the full commission at that point, that we have a time frame for when the programs will be in place long enough for data to be collected and evaluated to determine the impact this is having on crime and on particular communities. Also, if there were to be, I really appreciate the elimination of the chronic offender bulletin and the clear understanding by the department of the problems with that program, and if any type of program like that were to be created again in the department, I would ask that that come back to the commission to ensure that it doesn't have the challenges that the chronic offender bulletin program had, and that we're able to monitor that going forward. And I'll just say too, I think the focus here is on these data-driven policing strategies, on suppression policing. But as you've said, I mean, the real goal is prevention, although deterrence is part of that. The prevention is the goal, and that addressing sort of the root causes of crime in these communities is the larger purpose. And so I would like to explore community policing practices that the department is undertaking, and potentially, new and innovative approaches that we can have to addressing some of the root causes of crime that aren't just about suppression of policing, but that are other strategies that together take a more comprehensive approach to addressing the underlying issues.
Commissioner Bonner?
Thank you. First question, I'm sure is obvious. You were reading here thinking that this is the department's response to the IG report. I'm just going to walk through some questions relative to that document first. First question with regard to some of the terminology, because I heard the chief mention some of those sensitivities around that, which I share. But I have to review what the precise status is. Line, this still uses the data-driven policing strategies, and then in the first sentence in the background refers to this term that I'm seeing now, smart policing. So can you just share with me kind of the difference between those two terms, and is smart policing now the new term that's being used, or is it a term that's been used prior to that?
For a long time.
The whole damn grant was under.
Smart policing's been around for a minute, Bonner. Wake
Sure.
up, people.
So Smart
National
Policing
Grant,
came about in
2009.
2011 as a joint venture with
God you're
the
voting on
Bureau of
this.
Justice Administration.
And by the way, I'm not asking for history on smart policing. What I'm asking for is relative to this report. I don't recall, and I could have just missed it in my reading the IG report and so on, but we were using the terms data-driven policing, and I'm just asking the relationship between that term and smart policing.
I'm sorry, the relationship between Smart Policing and which one?
Is that smart?
He got
Absolutely. As a conversation about data-driven.
I'm sure Shane
Absolutely.
knows
So
though.
Smart Policing was the overarching terminology that was utilized to describe laser and pitbull, which was the two data-driven strategies that were under the Smart Policing program. It was a system identified to leverage the precise manner in which policing could be delivered. Instead of the random patrols that the chief spoke about earlier, it was the ability for us to focus our officers in a smarter manner so that they are more precise in their activities.
So, this point, I don't want to belabor the point, because it's really a question of almost semantics. All I'm asking is, the IG report was a review of selected data-driven policing strategies. Now I'm seeing a memo that's that's addressing smart policing. I'm just wanting to make sure I'm using the proper term in the conversation.
It's synonymous.
All right, well, I'm going to continue to use data-driven policing if it doesn't matter. On the bottom of page 2, there's the first couple of pages are kind of summarizing some of the status quo. The bottom there's the last sentence in that page says the department review of those identified with few or no points did not identify individuals without a criminal history or who were uninvolved in prior criminal activity. And I'm wondering if you can clarify that, the intent of the meeting. I just want to make sure it's not suggesting that, hey, we found people who had some criminal history, so it's okay to violate their rights. It's way different than somebody who doesn't have anything. Those words in your mouth, I'm just wanting to understand what that sentence is intended to require for.
What do you think it's intended to signify?
So let me first of all say that the identification of a chronic offender, we, in our description of its initial rollout and pilot efforts, as well as built across the city, across all the areas of the department, was initially meant to identify violent offenders as part of the laser program. The individual being identified as a chronic offender in and of itself did not justify reasonable suspicion for a stop, a detention, or an arrest. And nor did it justify or identify any ability of the organization to ignore a person's constitutional rights. There's no suggestions of that in the training or the literature that was provided as incomplete as the Inspector General found it, and its description in each instance. It was much as a offender bulletin, an information bulletin is given as to a suspect involved in a crime, perhaps an image caught or a burglar that was broken into a home and was captured by a CCTV, and that information bulletin was put out. that actually has more information into it that may justify a reasonable suspicion for stop than a chronic offender bulletin. Chronic offender bulletin was meant to provide officers with information about individuals that, on the basis of their prior conduct, suggested or suggested
What about
that
due
they
process?
may be involved in
Due process.
crimes that the officers are now in effort of patrolling or investigating. In each of the bulletins was
This
marked.
is a police.
Sir, I'm gonna ask you to stop disrupting the meeting. I promise you, sir, in the green shirt, when it's your turn, when you're speaking, you won't be disrupted. You
That's a
will
lie,
not be
Steve.
disrupting anyone else. This is your final warning.
Shut up!
So
Steve
please
constantly
stop
disrupts people.
disrupting
Yeah, my
the meeting.
boyfriend Courtney here keeps
Please.
shouting, and you
Right.
got this guy one.
Why you
Right.
pick on the black guy?
For talking.
Right.
The white people here can shout.
Right, I've been shouting at you the whole time, you ain't said shit to me, why you picking on black people?
Well, because I didn't see you, and now that I do see you, it's your final warning, because I couldn't see you.
Final warning.
That's exactly the
First and
reason.
final.
I couldn't see you.
Yeah, the police don't see my
Okay, go ahead.
He also became racist.
Wow, those policemen,
Yeah.
you're racist.
The Inspector General review of the chronic offenders found that in areas of the city, that there were offenders that were identified that were not necessarily individuals that had a violent crime history. Areas that we, in our review of this, as we looked at their work as well as in talking with our area commands, we found areas that did not have high concentrations of violent crime, that had higher concentrations of property crime, that they used. They went to identify habitual or chronic or repeat offenders and used this mechanism. So that the algorithm or the point schedule that applied was heavily weighted for violent crime or possession of a gun was actually applicable to the burglary suspect or the auto theft suspect. Because while that individual may have been arrested previously multiple times for burglary or for auto theft, maybe on probation or parole for such underlying conduct, that they didn't have offenses that were violent crime. So it was a tool that was applied by the area in an effort to address concerns of what are you doing with chronic offenders that varied from the desire. That's what it was also meant to be, is that we have no information today that anyone who was identified as a chronic offender was simply someone picked at random. Someone that was just had no involvement with law enforcement in any fashion or form, and yet someone simply tried to put a name on a bulletin to satisfy an area demand, a bureau demand.
I was trying to say zero, the people
On
with
that
no.
last one, I just want to make sure, but you're not taking comfort in the fact, if somebody was identified as a bulletin and should not have been, you're not taking comfort in the fact that, okay, well, the mistake is somewhat okay because they did have some prior criminal activity. I just want to make sure that's not the perspective.
This report is not made to take comfort. It's made to clarify, because I think as the public looks to questions of how LAPD identified offenders, we have a responsibility to, if it were, as one might interpret, suggested, that, or people interpreted,
More, there was some with 0 points.
On a basis of no conduct in the past, that we have an obligation to mitigate that by the sense of what we did actually see in our experience as far as.
What about the 0 points, Mark?
We were identifying the inconsistencies and decentralization. And then in our expansion of laser to other areas, not all areas were designed to have laser, but we put it there. But all areas have chronic offenders. These chronic offenders were not all violent offenders. There are chronic offenders that drive crime in certain parts of the city. Motor vehicle theft, etc. So when the commands prepare you for concept and the questions are coming up about their chronic offender bulletin list, how are they doing? They were coming up with chronic offenders that were driving their crime. Again, it wasn't the again, there was no oversight to how they were developing the chronic
Just noting the discontinued use of the chronic offender bulletin, and in their place, the department will return to its practice of drawing critical information from physical descriptors of reported crimes, etc. Can you just clarify the status of the program? So so I get, I've heard a lot that the chronic offender bulletin has been discontinued as of August, so it's clear. But what does the rest of this mean in terms of what's in its place?
So currently, Commissioner, one of the things that we're doing is, this is akin to a wanted type flyer. As we develop information, specific information from a crime victim, as it relates to a specific identifier, whether it's a tattoo, as a birthmark, anything that specifically signals this individual as the offender. Let's put together a wanted bulletin for sorts to provide that to the officers during their mission so that they can be on the lookout for this individual to see if this is the one connected to the specific crime.
It's a new name.
In addition to that, we will obviously rely on our parole probation partners, asking them to see if they've had an individual that fits this description, that has a specific identifier that could be related to this specific crime. Again, in addition, that would be helping to try to remove, or either identify or remove the individual from committing an ongoing offense.
So what I'm still trying to understand is, with the termination of the chronic offender bulletin, is there another process in place where you're capturing information that will be used in the same way that chronic offender bulletins would have been used, or are you moving away from the approach behind the chronic offender bulletin?
We are completely moving away from that approach. We are not maintaining a database as we were with the chronic offender program. This will all be done in real time as that information is developed.
Okay, and I'm going now further down the same page to the questions regarding location-based programs. And similar issue, I can't quite tell what the status of this is in terms of you're identifying changes that are in process, changes that have been made for the ID report that are already operational. Something else, can you characterize kind of what the status is as we sit here today?
Absolutely. So all the laser zones that we had in the past have been eliminated. We're no longer identifying those laser zones. What we're trying to do is identify those micro hotspots or those places where crime is really concentrated, as the chief alluded to earlier, with crime locations, victimization. And we're going to the crime generators and crime attractors. These are locations where, for instance, a problematic liquor store that has a propensity for individuals to hang around and generate crime. That for us would be a crime attractor. A crime generator will be like a parking lot with a large number of vehicles at a venue that has
A crime generator?
vehicles being broken into. So within
You mean
those
like
micro
property or
hotspots,
something?
we're trying to identify, as Commissioner Goldsmith identified, as the root cause of what is driving crime.
Y'all
So
are.
we can specifically
A parking lot
identify it
causes
and
crime?
provide the appropriate measures, whether it's through community intervention, whether it's through our
Watch out
own
for
officers,
parking
whatever
lots.
the case happens
He
to
just
be,
said parking lots
so that
cause
we can
crime.
eliminate the crime and disorder that's occurring in
You're
that
not
particular
going to
spot.
eliminate crime when you commit crime.
Eliminate crime and disorder. To a higher level. What I'm trying to understand is this document that I'm kind of reviewing was presented to us as a summary of steps the department has taken, which I could be wrong, but I'm interpreting it as steps the department has taken in light of the IG's report, since or in light of or since the IG report. So that was some 3-4 weeks ago. And so the way it's presented is as if in the past 3 or 4 weeks, we've made all these changes, everybody's been trained, everybody's down.
Right.
I'm trying to understand if these are changes that are in process and that are going to be made, or are you saying really that people on the street in patrol now exactly know what they're supposed to be doing in regards to this?
So it's in process, number one. The information that was, you asked earlier about getting away from chronic offender bulletins and how we're going back to more BOLOs or wanted suspects and descriptors. That is fundamental and foundational work of law enforcement. That has existed for decades of work. The officers will always use that, working information from crime reports, from talking to victims, speaking to witnesses, to speaking to suspects on the street, and then the use of video intelligence for that as well. That is still going to exist. But as we continue to move forward with the training and developing the rollout and the manual for precision policing, the officers still know what to do. They still know what to do. They're still getting information. They're still driven by crime alerts and what's going on through their roll calls, of their smart boards and information from detectives. There's nothing on hold there. The officers are still working.
And let me just draw your attention to, I believe you're on page 3, location-based program. With respect to the location-based component, consistent with academic literature, precision policing, The department is currently in the process of evaluating the suitability. So it speaks to the fact that we're in the process. As you look through this, it speaks to the following page, that as we transition our efforts, what we're going to work on. And then the last page speaks to the fact that we have training, development of written materials. The organization is constantly evolving in its facility. And it has a bit of, I'll call the word tradecraft, strategies that have proven effective and others that have not. Transference of that. I think it's fair here that this manual that's been asked, that's been articulated, that's our response, is we better memorialize that tradecraft. How is it, where are they now? What does that mean when I say where are they now? What does that mean to a detective or to an officer that is...
What does that mean to the public? What does that mean to the victim?
So we need to memorialize these practices.
A police killing.
Bolo, be on the lookout. What is a bolo? What, to your term, what is smart policing versus data-driven? We're never static. There is a certain amount of capabilities or capacity today that we administer. I think what the Inspector General's reports saw and found is what we see experience in policing. Every ComStat inspection, every CSOC briefing, every briefing that occurs in a roll call room or a squad meeting is an evolutionary process of reinforcing those strategies, informing on new strategies or existing practices we want our people to engage in, and providing that instruction, guidance, and oversight so that they go out and execute.
So you're saying it's almost the same thing.
With our values. But it's never, I think probably will never be there, because each year we hire 500 more officers, and 500 more people who come in to a profession that has historic levels of practices and actions and activities and strategies that we have to instill and by experience. And that process is ultimately is continuous improvement to keep going at that. And when Inspector General or our own internal review finds shortfalls in it, which we will with an organization our size, is we're going to take efforts to accept those shortfalls, not defend them, but lean into them and find better ways and continue efforts to inform our people so that they're best suited to go out and do difficult work.
Okay, I've got you alluded to a couple of points I'll come back to in just a minute if I should. But in the same area, there's a question about the academic literature. We've had some email and public comments and things about that. Can you tell me just really kind of how brief or how broad and this literature review has been, and how broadly you kind of surveyed the landscape to inform the prior programs and more importantly the changes that are in progress?
So let me invite Chief Deputy Chief Sean Millen to this discussion if I could at this point.
The devil himself.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
So, sir, this literature review that was done is not on the level of something that would have been done for a doctoral dissertation, but it's something that from review must be done in other cities and looking at recent articles like the recent article on precision policing and what they've been doing in New York with some of the same concerns. It seems that the public wants the police to be more precise in what they're doing, and the literature talks about location-based and some of the academic
Zero
studies that have been done on
emails.
that, but I wouldn't say
Said
that
more
we have
precision.
written a dissertation or summarize what's been written about precision policing.
The National Academy of Sciences published a consortium of where we're at across the sciences in policing. And it spoke, and it gave a literature review that I'll be happy for us to make available to the commission that actually articulate. Research is filled with variability. It's a continuum of where people land on issues of what research proves and what research doesn't prove. This is a booklet that a collection of our respected institution, a nonpartisan institution, that said here is the inventory of where the sciences are at on these various location and offender-based strategies that are used in policing across America. Ones that have found statistical differences and others that are still open for debate. In summary, our review of this now nearly 2 years ago found that location-based strategies have found continued support and correlations between agencies that focus on proactive, data-driven design appointment, placement of officers in locations that have seen concentrations of crime that are not just on a randomized basis, but that are being draw points, versus
Based on your data.
offender-based systems, which are much more subjective and much more unproven as to whether or not risk-based assessments of people who are incarcerated and recently released have or placed in a community, risk-based assessments as to their proclivity or their likelihood of reoffending. The research is much less clear on that, which is in part informing us on where we're at today in policing in Los Angeles, is that if the offender-based work is so uncertain, then why are we losing, I don't want us to lose public trust because of belief that the underlying weights and values have an inherent bias to it. If we can't answer that question, then let's pull back from that strategy, but let's not pull back from strategies that are well understood across American policing, that cops count, and officers responding in the neighborhoods and working in those neighborhoods with an understanding of individuals who are preying and criminalizing or victimizing people in those neighborhoods, that those officers having that information can interrupt that, both by their presence, but also have a responsibility to identify and bring justice to the individuals who are offenders. That's kind of where we're at, but again, we will be happy to get you that collection for.
Well, let me just ask, I'm going to just ask a little bit about the UCLA communications we've had. That was part of what the Inspector General alluded to, this public comment that came in, and we did receive some other information from them. Are you familiar with the letter that we received, a long list of signatories? So in that letter, they at least identify some other individuals, I think, that are held out as experts in this area. Columbia Professor Bernard Harcourt and Harvard mathematician Kathy O'Neill. Are you familiar at least with either of those academics and what their research indicates? So can you give me an example just of, say, one area or one issue where there's a point of disagreement and pinpoint where the academic literature comes out on? Just give me both sides of the issue.
So I think that there is an ongoing debate in academia about taking anthropological research in particular and applying it to criminology and the blending of those two fields, and then, as has been described in some of the comments here, turning that into a business. And so I think there's some people have an objection of taking what was meant to be pure research in the
Applying
past,
it at all.
and then expanding it to criminology, and then coming up with a business plan and implementing that in the real world. That seems to be the road.
It says they've expressed their serious skepticism about the empirical and ethical rigor of the research. Again, can you tell me what the fault line is there relative to the fault line?
So there were some studies that were done initially to try to look at the effectiveness of predictive policing here and in other cities. And I think that the opinion of some of the academics was because it was done by academic researchers who were associated with the vendor. It was not a pure research model.
What is
They were paid.
If there was more accuracy in trying to predict crime.
Why is he using words like business and vendor?
We tried our best in a real world environment to do.
He's capitalisming the whole thing.
To try to come up with the answer to the question: can the algorithm predict crime or forecast crime more accurately than our current practice? And that's why we did those initial studies.
Experiments
on the going back now to the page 3 of the department's response, the last paragraph there that speaks to location-based programs. So the department is redesigning anchor points into a discussion of crime generator and crime attractor locations consistent with academic literature. So can you explain that, what that is referring to? Both in terms of my ongoing question about understanding the status. So for it says the department is redesigning, so I understand that to be a work in progress. But tell me what the considerations are around that.
So it is a work in progress because we had asked the divisions to come up with anchor points as term that we use, where do you
Sounds
see
very
crime
data-driven.
being anchored in the community? And in fact, the literature, if you look back at it, refers to it, and this is some 30 years old, refers to these crime generator and crime attractor locations. The chief had asked us to go back and say, you know, this is not something he wants the LAPD to come up with, but he wants it to be grounded in actual research. So when we did the research, we found those articles that seem to still be pertinent today to talk about the crime generator and crime attractor. And as part of our effort to standardize this throughout the department, and we can refer to that when we're doing the training for our officers in the field.
And again, the research on this is that it's not just a police presence that has a displacing effect, but it also goes to the role of our engagement with the victims or the locations themselves. There's a concept called crime reduction through environmental design. So the nature is referenced of a liquor store that has its windows blocked through ads and displays. They have operating practices that the offenders find right for abuse. And we'll focus on and victimize those locations repeatedly. That it's not just a police presence there that we seek, but location-based strategies are what
You've been using that for years, though. That's not new.
Business can deter crime, can improve their resilience. There's a reference talked about each year.
That's been used since the 1990s.
Activities at the convention center.
What's new?
Location-based strategies there include the fact that when there's an auto show or a large event, that we find those gatherings of tens of thousands of automobiles to be sitting ducks, if you will. That the offenders recognize that there's an event going on there, and they'll go and prey upon those automobiles. And that our efforts, not just to have the presence at that location, but working with that organizer, working with that parking lot attendant, working with
I'm glad, because I was worried when I was getting ready to go to the auto show, you know, I was, it's in my car.
the location-based strategies that are referenced here, we want to get away from using an anchor point because, again, the phraseology, the note you saw had a negative impact.
That's the
But
problem.
we do want to get to, we want to
The
stick with the
damning.
sign that talks about the fact that there are generators, there are locations, there are behaviors, and patterns that exist that are location-based.
Parking lots
How
cause
we
crime,
smartly
that's the second
work
time they said it.
in articulating what those strategies are to prevent crime, but also to identify those who are using those locations to feed their habit, if you will, and who are preying upon those victims. And we need to identify those individuals and bring them to justice as well as the due process.
So, on the top, at the top of page 4, that references the transition reference in developing a precision policing model to develop a framework that incorporates neighborhood policing, focus on victimization, accurately focusing efforts on location-based crime. Speak to what you're doing and what can be done to avoid the undue or adverse impact on innocent people who are in or around those locations.
So let me first say that, and Chief Arcos, I welcome this coming back to operations. I don't want to dominate this matter, but I'll quickly point out that as we ask about community policing engagement, we see our efforts with community safety partnership, those programs of adding officers in areas not from an enforcement posture, but
I have
from
4
a
actually,
posture of building and understanding the nature of those communities that
because
are in most instances
I can't do
highly
things
impacted
on
by
this
particularly violent crime.
and live streaming.
And how can we
And in a little while, I'm gonna stream on 2 forums.
other support and efforts can be brought in that are not necessarily police-led, but that by our presence we can improve the public perception of our intent and desire, improve the safety of those communities, and identify as problem solvers what are strategies that can create the resilience of that area, the ability to combat and be
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Additionally, the efforts of the department in the last 2 years of moving more than 600 personnel back to the field by downsizing specialized functions or eliminating those functions by reallocating resources to our area stations is an effort to build upon neighborhood policing by having additional resources that are not simply going from call to call to call, but are going in neighborhoods to outreach and engage in the community to understand what are your pressing issues, how are we helping, how are we hurting. Lastly, All of this, though, depends on officers having accurate and timely information. In the absence of that, of a situational awareness, what are the characteristics of their neighborhood?
We need more money.
And what is the neighborhood enduring? What successes are they seeing? But what are their challenges? In the absence of that, we're simply going out there blind. Safe walks to schools, efforts that are engaging those communities. We see those roll calls in the street, neighborhood watch programs, town hall meetings, forums of engagement. Those are all policing strategies.
Here's what I'm asking is, or what I'm trying to understand is, if you identify an area that warrants particular presence, activity to prevent crime, everybody in that area is not necessarily going to be a perpetrator of a crime. So what I'm asking is, what's embedded in the training, the discussion, the efforts underway to make sure that people who are otherwise innocent are not being, and I don't mean simply arrested, falsely arrested. I'm thinking in terms of people who are going to have to deal with being in proximity to potentially enhance law enforcement presence.
There's nothing to protect them.
It goes to, and this could be I think it's an area that deserves a better, more detailed representation.
They're gonna kick Bonner off, watch.
We hire people of great value. We have personal characteristics of emotional intelligence, who care and have a concern to make a difference and recognize that they're serving.
Did emotional intelligence save for Shari O'Mac?
We then go into training and guidance as to what tools, what constitutional rights are moving forward and how they go about policing and how sacred their responsibilities are. Then
This motherfucker
train
gets this
and
much
then
time
go out
and me each
and
get 2
oversee
motherfucking minutes.
and supervise and lead. And most recently with body worn video and other audits and inspections, having the time to go back and look back and identify where and reinforce instances where officers get it right. And are doing it exactly consistent with the model of procedural justice and respecting the rights and dignity of everyone involved, and they're carrying out these values that are on these walls. But when we fall short, that we hold those individuals accountable, that we provide training, but also accountability for those that are not fulfilled. That whole system is something that is inherent to policing. With LAD, I believe we're a culture, and we're committed to continuing it as we move forward. And yet adding to it attributes that new technologies such as body-worn video and digital video give us into the inside of what actually is occurring. That most recent report by the Inspector General of the 91 stops by gang officers, I think, was an example. That the evolution of this craft now allows officers to both lead what they're doing, but also supervisors, command staff, and the public in this commission to validate or not. And we find shortfalls.
Validate or not.
For that the whole system.
Chief, before I move on to my last couple of questions, I'll put a final point on this. Yes.
I just want to make a point, though, Commissioner, with the Office of Operations now having direct oversight of the running of the program, and we've learned from the inconsistencies applied and the failures of Laser. Laser was not designed as a one-size-fits-all for 20 different areas across the city. Precision policing is much better designed to meet the unique needs of every area and every command. And in particular, the neighborhood policing component that's built into precision policing is a much better design as far as the accountability and effectiveness of how we go into these micro hotspots. In addition to micro hotspots,
Just made up that idea.
it can move daily. Where anchor points designed with Laser were designed for 6 months to a year, where we're constantly coming to these neighborhoods, to your point, again, where people were being contacted. Micro hotspots can be there for 1 day. They can move another day. And that's, again, the versatility and the flexibility that's designed into precision policing that we will roll out, again, with a very directed consistency.
So my request on this particular issue, and again, I'm still on page 4, and at the end of that first paragraph under C, where it says that since data-driven strategies are still an emerging field, the development and implementation of new technologies will further refine their use and provide opportunities to obtain independent evaluations of the efficacy and impact of data-driven policing programs. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm reading this when the reference to the efficacy and impact I'm reading that to mean the impact on dating prevent crime, what the crime statistics and those impact. What I'm asking specifically is that the very concept of impact also take into consideration the impact on innocent people.
That's what we're talking about here.
And that's exactly what I'm speaking to too as well. Adverse impact on people who are
you're
being
not.
stopped in an area is not something that we are looking to design this program around. We are going to where the crime is being.
Talking about
So I guess
parking
that's-
lots that cause crime.
What I'm asking is to formalize, so that the very notion of impact, when you're evaluating the impact of these programs, that you're not looking at it simply from the impact of, from the law enforcement impact on crime, that you're also looking at it on the impact of the human impact, if you will, on people and communities.
I agree. The commission has made it very clear to the department about that impact that we're having, again, from the data-driven policing programs, from AFDRs, and from procedural justice. And all that stuff is occurring right now. We are going back at it, again, with a very fervor to it, and training our supervisors and our officers and across the board to make sure, again, that is really well understood.
Commissioner, we followed this discussion on this page with the community surveys that speak to this very issue. So I apologize if there's some component of this report or our presentation that suggests that the measure of LEP and this administration is the absence of crime at any cost. That is absolutely not the case. I'm proud of the men and women who go out each day, and as I'm sure you are, that are here to build trust in community by their actions.
No member of the community here trusts you.
And so this was paragraph of the evaluation. The proximity of the survey that was talked about is understanding that we need to improve the sentiments, understanding the sentiment of each of the neighborhoods, the neighborhood level, to understand how our application of our strategies are actually building and reinforcing trust or undermining it. This is not an agency that's looking to do an Operation Hammer or return to the ghosts of our past, where we're simply oppressing and everything that moves is somehow an enemy or
Charlie, you're mad. Appreciate that. And along those lines, on the list of the surveys and some of the things that you may be, some of the other tools you may be using, it seems to me that the effectiveness of some of these fact surveys, telephone surveys, internet surveys, online focus groups, and those things, the efficacy of those are going to vary tremendously based on the communities you're dealing with, and particularly considering that many people who are in some of the most impacted communities are not people who spend their days online surfing online and the like. So I appreciate some comment about what specific steps are going to be taken to make sure that these types of surveys and things are culturally relevant and really getting to the people that I would presume we're most concerned about are innocent people who already have it difficult enough living in a difficult environment or community. So what specific kinds of steps are going to be taken to make sure that these are tailored in a way that capture that kind of impact input?
So I think these are things that exist today, and again, I think to your point, again, they can be varied from community to community, where you're hitting, but these are the things that exist today that we can actually go to find some sort of measure of sentiment. In addition to those things, these are things that are ongoing.
You've done that before today.
The days of dialogue, the town halls, the forums where people who are invited to be out there come and talk to the police. Those things are ongoing as well and can be used as a measure of sentiment of what's going on in our community.
And yet, as you know, this department was engaged in a survey. The last survey was approximately a year ago. And we have those measures and we clearly see the differences between communities across the city.
And he's more
We recently were approved by the city
with a
council,
smile. It's like everything
allow a
that happened before, but now with him it's with a smile.
There is no perfect one.
That would say
Short
short and to the point. And then somebody else would go short to the
We
point. This guy
recognize
just
and
goes,
we comes back to the commission with
only
a
sent through
design
smart
model, if
devices.
you will,
because his
that
softer,
speaks to,
gentler
Yeah, right.
fascism, what's
whether
the word?
Cell phone, or
That's
based, or internet based, or door to door. We are.
Lucid does not go door to door.
The most recent,
Please don't go to my door.
transition
Actually,
to
talk to
the
his hands a lot.
computer-aided dispatch system that will occur this summer, for instance, is going to give us the ability to do callbacks and text back.
People that don't want to hear back from you.
Design
Yeah.
of that.
He knew he was
allows
on his
us
way
to
out,
reach
that's
back to people who call LAPD for a satisfaction survey. And we have no idea what we'll find. We'll find various reactions. But how do we then start getting that data and start systematically looking at it so that we can understand what are strategies that we should do, that we can engage in to pursue, focus groups. We are a customer service business.
You're in the killing business.
A methodology that has multiple touch points.
Who is
It
the
won't be perfect.
customer?
I suspect there'll be others that will be critical of it for one aspect or another. But we will work with the commission and look forward to this leadership and helping us design where is the sweet spot for that.
For sure, you might can't fill out a
Two
satisfaction survey.
Chief Marcos, as I understand it, you are, and you've alluded to a couple of times, as being kind of assuming the accountability for the program.
Where's
So one thing I'd like,
Peter Ragosa, whatever her name is?
some follow-up information is really just
Sharon,
started out in
you know,
terms of
what's
what
her name?
is, where's the, how's the
Sandra
accountability
Figueroa, yeah.
from
Where
you
is
all
she?
the way down
Judith?
to the street, and from the street all the way up to you, so that'd be helpful to understand how
Via
that
Ragosa was the mayor,
accountability is
wasn't
going
he?
to work, not just on paper,
Figueroa,
but also
Via
in practice.
Ragosa. They're all the same.
The Office of Operations already is designed for that, to oversee geographic bureaus, and each of the geographic bureaus oversee all of our 21 areas, so that will be the accountability mechanism going forward, is that the bureau chiefs will be responsible for ensuring the implementation of precision policing is happening, accurately and consistently across their bureaus. We'll be looking at that through the design of metrics and our own inspections from our back office under the direction of Commander Rodriguez and his cadre that will go out there. We'll also, right now, identifying a lieutenant that will be assigned to the Office of Operations that will be our point of contact to make sure that the precision policing policies are being followed at the area guidelines.
So thank you very much. I guess the last question maybe that is for the chief.
Not him again.
To respond or to indicate to me, from a high level standpoint, what I'm hearing is you have a program that's where there's been a number of issues identified. You have a potential harm and impact on people who are, I don't mean potentially about people's constitutional rights being potentially implicated. Uncertain or dubious benefits of the program. I'm not saying there's none. I'm saying that I don't know that, at least from the IG's report and the other information, that was not clear what the benefits have been. So we're hearing that it's a lot of work in progress. That there's a lot of things that are steps that you're taking that are well suited. But the question I think is there harm in suspending the programs until everybody's satisfied?
That's it. Woo!
Just to clarify the question, I'm not a law enforcement official, so I'm not saying it's not in carrying out the mission. What I'm asking is relative to informalized programs that were the subject of the IG's report. If they're in flux and being worked on, why would we not just push the pause button until everybody's certain that all the issues are resolved?
How dare
Perhaps I would benefit by understanding your first assertion, that was that the constitutional rights of individuals were impacted. Where and what aspect of the report did you?
No, I'm talking about potentially implicated.
No, sir, I'm sorry. I'm asking, before I suspend
Ooh, he's
to
sweating.
monitor the police and provide for the public safety in the city of Fort Worth, we are relying upon strategies that those who help on pragmatically that crime occurs in our city, that people are victimized, people die at the hands of others.
And cops.
Disproportionately stopping black people.
And people lose valuables as well as their sense of security. by people who are within our neighborhoods. And as a policing professional and as a law enforcement agency, the second largest in the country, we have to have a framework based on values and based upon strategies that, while imperfect, and not always easily to be able to look back.
Stop the filibuster. Why not shut it down?
Deserves an investment of trust that as
When you can't see one benefit.
If you want this meeting to continue, we can have this discussion and we can have our vote. If you want to have public input, when you get up there, you can say whatever you want and there will be no interruption.
Give us
If you're going to
as much time
disrupt
as
this
he
meeting,
had.
I'm going to recess this meeting and then bring it back where we don't have disruption. I'm asking you, please, you will have the respect and courtesy of everyone in the room when you're speaking. So will the chief of the police.
So specifically, I believe that the Inspector General identified with chronic offender bulletin, something that needed to be suspended and now walked away from. On the Pred poll, and to the extent that laser identified place-based concentrations of violent crime in laser circumstances and in Pred poll property-based crime, I believe that, and we are committed to providing not just the research, but the practical experience of that, understanding where those locations are, and the description of how those locations exist, and understanding how interventions by the police and by others can change and lower crime. That's the tradecraft that we've been engaged in, and will continue. To suspend Pred poll because it's a brand, to suspend laser because it's a brand, I think is warranted in laser's instance, because materially, the aspect of the chronic offender bulletin we need to walk away from and go back to practices that we've engaged in the past. And on the location aspect of it, it's the corridors and so forth that are identified. We can deal with by still needing to identify locations where violent crime is concentrated and identifying the circumstances of how those are going about and what are our strategies to work in partnerships and community engagement to interrupt and stop and reduce that. Pred poll does not, to this point, have the, I have not found, and the organization has not found, absent its error in regards to police stations, that it, looking at a group of, I'll say, Devonshire area that has 50 square miles and 40 million people, 300,000 people, to take those 200 or 300 officers and to ignore and to treat every neighborhood the very same, is to ignore where patterns and series are occurring today.
We're doing that without Pred poll. You're targeting them
We
before
need a
that.
strategy that identifies that
Talking about.
data, that's based on data, that's based on officer awareness and engagement in the community, that's based on community input. And we need strategies that then challenge our communities and challenge our command to identify strategies that's going to be effective and then gauge that effectiveness and then restart it over. That is the process that the organization has been engaged in. I'm committed as the chief going forward, but to suspend, if you will, the Pred poll because it's got because of the doctor's work with UCLA or because of the background of it. I believe
No, because it's a bunch of
suspend
shit.
location-based strategy. And I'm not, and we will continue to look at how it comes up with these boxes, but I want to stress to the organization, I need 10,000 men and women to also understand that as a chief and as this commission, that we seek for them to go out and identify problems and challenges in their community, people who are being victimized, people who are being unfairly targeted, and that we expect them to not just be aware of that, but to take actions to try to stop that. That requires a knowledgeable and informed workforce. And to abandon this because of critics that are in this room is not an overreaction.
Okay, just to clarify, I'm not suggesting to abandon the location-based strategy.
We are.
And that's not, but the feeling that I get, I think I've alluded to a couple times, just that there's a general feeling that there's a lot of work in progress, efforts being made. And it sounds like good adjustments that are being made, but it's almost like working on the car as you're driving down the freeway, so that it starts to sound like.
Our quality through continuous improvement.
Stop pointing at the wall.
As an acronym, I think it's to be commended.
That's a big lie up on here.
And so to look at that, I think we do need
To read off the walls,
the program in
to remember.
practice is having serious and detrimental impacts on community safety, then I don't believe in working in that progress. I believe that we step away from it. I have not seen location-based strategies or organizations involved in, and I do look for specifics, whether by the Inspector General or anyone else, that we've unfairly targeted a location because of the instances or concentration or the frequency in which those locations have been victimized by.
We're not your subjects.
Thank you.
Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner and Commissioner Goldsmith, members of the subcommittee who I know have worked hard on these issues, to the Inspector General, to the members of the community who are attending today, in March and in July. While I was not on the commission at that time, I did watch the entire video from, I believe it was July 24th. And I'd also like to thank the department very much for its work on this, for its openness, Chief, and receptiveness in making change. I do believe that is critical to the success of this department overall. My fellow commissioners have asked a lot of questions, many of which I was going to ask and go into areas I was not intending, but I'd like to sum up my question or concern in the following manner. Obviously, this commission, the department, has a great obligation to the people of the city to reduce crime, be a partner in reducing crime with the community, and to keep the community safe. But we have to use the resources of the department in a very smart and effective way, and do so in a manner that does not treat the residents of any community differently. The problem with the report is the lack of information to support that.
Right.
And I do believe the information exists, but it's not provided in this report. Maybe it's in, or it hasn't been collected, maybe it requires a little more detail to go into, maybe it requires looking at the field investigation cards, or maybe it requires finer detail. I'm convinced there is a way to establish this, to ensure the department's using its resources effectively, protecting the community, engaging the community.
Keeping everybody in the dark, that's what
But
they're
it
here for.
just hasn't been put together, and the way to build the trust, as you all know, is to establish that you are working together with the community and being effective and using the resources this city gives the department in a very effective manner. We don't have the data. I'm convinced it is there. It can be obtained. It might be more challenging and difficult, but I would ask that the command staff, Chief, work with the subcommittee members to bring it all together for us, because the different programs you've highlighted, Chief, the different, I know, crime data that is collected by the department, perhaps to the field investigation cards that are now required to be kept, can collectively create a much better picture of what is going on. I think that's what the commission needs. I think that's what the community needs. Chief, do you want to respond to that?
Thank you, Commissioner, and nothing is more important to us than reducing the fear of incidents of crime and building trust in our communities here in Los Angeles. So, I respect your remarks, and we'll go back at this again, and we'll be prepared to provide something in much greater detail on how this rollout looks like, how the accountability happens, and the training looks like. We'll certainly come back and report back to the subcommittee on what that will be.
Let me just say,
Yep.
clearly, the additional information that needs to be gathered, or is gathered, and the commission or the subcommittee feels they need to see, should be a part of these upcoming quarterly reports, not a hold on starting. We'll take public comment now.
Who decided
Believe
that?
me, they need to hear public comment.
Yes,
That's the only truth they're gonna get today.
Okay.
He just decided that.
The first three, Mr. Herman, Michael Novick,
They need to hear
We don't have time to wait for people.
You have time.
Oh, wow. First, go ahead, sir. Mr. Novick, go ahead, sir.
God forbid.
Mr. Novick, are you want to start your time? Start the clock, please.
Wow. All right, going on here. It's great that they abolished the chronic offender program. Most people, I don't know why they're fighting so hard for this place-based policing, and I'll tell you why. It's because there are people in the city who demand aggressive, suppressive policing. It's the people who want to turn Venice into Malibu, the people who want to turn downtown LA and Skid Row into San Francisco. It's the people who want to turn Crenshaw, to do the Crenshaw what they've done to Washington D.C. and Harlem, which is turn them white. It's the people who want to, in areas of hot anti-colonial and class struggle like Boyle Heights and Highland Park, they want the police to displace not crime, but the people who live there now. Because they charge $3,000 or $3,500 for a one-bedroom apartment like they do in San Francisco. And that's what's going on. This is not about crime suppression. This is about transforming the city of Los Angeles into somebody's dream and somebody's nightmare. So let's talk about that reality. The reason they can't justify what they're doing and can't find the data to back it up is because it's not about data. They changed the name. They used to say it was data-driven, evidence-based policing, but identifying so-called chronic offenders is not about evidence. It's about what kind of city you want to live in and who's going to live in it. So the reason you have this outrage is not because these people have an axe to grind. These are the people who are suffering from aggressive, suppressive policing. They're from the communities that are being driven out of the city. You want to displace not crime, you want to displace these people to Palmdale and Barstow and Las Vegas because they can't live in Los Angeles anymore. And that's not the city I want to live in, but I think you represent the class of people who do.
That's right.
Make it turn.
No public education falls to the issues of mental health under Penal Code 422, which is a criminal threat. See, criminalizing people in the community and asking them to leave immediately is a criminal threat in itself. And you continue to tell Mike Fuhrer, the fucking racist attorney from the city at 213-978-8100. If you call, you can make a claim under 91.5A, fuck the police. So I, just being a little UC rat, and know about Robert Kane and his child molestation, I have mythologies too. Step one is A, you're wrong. Step B, you're still wrong. And in addition to that, not to do, as you said in quote, Mr. Soboroff, not to do, data, fair, rational, and trust. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that was you, Mr. Michael Moore. Remember back in 2012 when you kicked me out of my community because you called me out on a penal code and retaliation, and now I'm fucking living in the street based on the conditions of the first speaker. You fucking assholes are son of a bitches, motherfuckers.
Off topic. This isn't about you. This is about what the...
No submission. No submission because in the report, motherfuckers, in the report...
Next speaker, please.
What?
Next speaker.
He said,
Sir. Next speaker, please.
Right here it says review of the laser program. And the laser program is just...
Wait, didn't Steve promise nobody would get interrupted, and now he's interrupting him? You stop interrupting, Steve.
Okay.
The next speaker is Gina Viola, followed by Jerry Dietrich, Zach Sherwin, and Ted Guerra.
Okay.
Soboroff, you just violated your own promise. You said they would not be interrupted when giving general comment.
Sir.
You did.
Do you have a card in, sir?
Excuse me.
Here's my card.
In your report, you atrociously call an audit. Failed to mention the harm that these programs have caused to the community. Cite some of that for you now. June of 2016, Gang Enforcement Division officers stopped a car in the 77th Street area laser zone as a person in the car was wearing a white Black Sox baseball cap on what the DA's report described as Hood Day. During the stop, the officer killed Keith Bursey, a 31-year-old black man, shooting him once in the chest and twice in the back. Later that year, October 2016, another officer was conducting pedestrian and vehicular code enforcement in a high-crime area per crime suppression assignment in the 77th Street area. Officers passed a car containing 18-year-old black youth, Carnell Snell Jr., and initiated a chase and leaned forward towards the front passenger seat. The officer shot Snell by shooting him in the back. Later still that same year, December of 2016, Metro officer was patrolling a known gang area in an unmarked car, assigned to a... Now I ask you this, if any of those people killed were white, would you shut them? Response to your comment about preventing crime. You do not prevent crime. You just don't. You just can't. Only healthy communities can prevent crime. And you are keeping communities from being healthy with your presence. Shut it down.
Hi, my name is Jerry Dietrich. I'm with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. When I entered the room today to declare my disdain for these programs, Predpol and Laser, but according to your agenda, you only are going to either approve the IG report, review the IG report, or approve the department's report. So I don't know. Anyhow, all the same, I just want to say, I want you to disband these expensive, ineffective, and unwelcome programs. As you've been told numerous times, no one in the LA community wants them to continue. If you ask more time, so I'm going to comment on all these wonderful discussions I've heard today. First thing, Chief Moore, your precision policing, I see this as something new in name only. That will take the community another 2 years to disband. And will be renamed something else if we don't want. And Commissioner Goldstein, you commented here, I liked some of your comments, and then one interesting, you said, since we have such limited info, and I agree with what Decker also said about the limited info. And I'm certain that the goal of the LAPD is to keep the commission in the dark as well as the community. The more we talk about transparency, the less transparent they will be.
All right.
Next speaker is Jack Sherwin, followed by Tiff Guerra.
So I'll start by saying that the Inspector General very studiously avoided rendering any value judgment on the fact that over 99% of the responses had identical language. But just in case there is any insinuation that the fact that a lot of people cared to take the time to send an email, even if that email did have identical language, indicates that hundreds of people were involved in that. In the middle, an even higher percentage of the language was identical in the remarks in support of these programs, which is 0. There was no language in any of them. Chief Moore says that he wants programs that are fair and rational and that are going to build trust, recognize bias, identify community concerns, and then later he said, this isn't doublespeak. Nobody even thought about doublespeak until you say, this isn't doublespeak. It's not a thing you say when you aren't practicing doublespeak. Right. These are not the ways to achieve the goals you're articulating, Chief. These programs fill these areas with cops who are looking to racially profile folks who have already been criminalized despite not having done anything. Carnell Snell, who the previous speaker, Gina, mentioned, was seen looking suspiciously in a vehicle going in the opposite direction. It's not throwing out a baby with the bathwater, it's throwing out a turd with the bathwater. These programs don't deserve to be in existence. I'm sorry to laugh into bathroom talk. Finally, in terms of building trust, Commissioner Soboroff, the snarling scorn and contempt that you display for the community members in the room, there's absolutely no chance that that does anything towards building trust in here. Do you want to get this meeting started or not? To Michael Novick, when he's asking about a procedural question on how to comment on the agenda. I can't imagine what it's like to exist inside yourself. And finally, to say Argos, look, that information that we need, obviously that's in a quarterly report instead of keeping us from what we need to do. Clearly, your fellow commissioners do not necessarily agree with that opinion, and I don't think you should take it as for granted. Yes. Nice.
So we see how LAPD is posturing here as being this police force that is very responsive to public criticism, and how, now that they know the program isn't working, they are responding by shutting down those parts that don't work and looking for something different and better.
Right.
But let's be clear that predictive policing and Operation Laser has been researched and explored within LAPD for over 10 years now. And what we know from your internal documents is that LAPD had copious reports regarding Operation Laser and how it was working and what was going on with it. There were daily, weekly, monthly, annual reports, hundreds of them. The issue isn't that the program wasn't being tracked and monitored. The issue is that LAPD was tracking the program, and they were just fine with how it was operating.
Right.
And we understand why if we listen to a recent interview with Bill Bratton, who was the ex-chief here who implemented broken windows policing and predictive policing, and who is the person who began precision policing, which is what they are trying to move into next. And in this interview, we hear Bratton get complimented on what is referred to as his success here in LA. And specifically, what is referred to as how the downtown area has come back and is very prosperous now. And this is referred to as a positive effect of policing.
Yeah.
And it struck me when listening to this, that they are confirming something that we already know, and that is that with policing in these programs, the goal is not to actually reduce crime or to make communities more safe. The goal is redevelopment.
Right.
And the goal is profit. And the goal is moving people out of their homes. And in moving families that live in those areas now out of their homes, that's what these programs do. That's what they allow LAPD and the city to do. And that's why the LAPD is okay with the programs working the way they are, because it was never a tool of crime reduction. It's a tool of displacement and of criminalization. And while you are focusing on taking away areas and property, it's the people that live there that you are harming. And we're not hearing any of you talking about that. You're harming families, you're harming communities, and we demand that you shut this shit down. We don't want your precision policing, we don't want your predictive policing, we don't want any of this shit, and we're gonna shut it down.
Paul, Mimi Soltysik, and Josh Mayer.
We've been hearing a lot today about how predictive policing that's place or location-based is benign, and I want to talk against that. First of all, there's no such thing as place-based or location-based. Crime data, which is based off of decades of racial profiling, crime data is inherently racist. The hotspots you gave us also showed that with Predpool, you're effectively creating a quarantine around Skid Row by creating a constant presence of dense hotspots, which we've mapped based on, by the way, like around 8 of what we have in legally required PRAs. So finally, what I would want to say is about all this, you're offering us little ways to tinker with it, optimize with it. And what we're trying to say is that the very fundamental question you're asking, which is, who are the people that we're going to deem as suspicious? Where are the places that we want to apply violence? These are not questions that we want answered, no matter what the answer is. So what we want to say is no amount of tinkering and optimizing will give us an answer that we'll be satisfied with. At the basis of this is a colonial question of how to best suppress a colonized population. And we know this because Brantingham himself created this work based off studying insurgencies in US-occupied Iraq and Afghanistan. So what we know is that what we're trying to do right here is apply the same exact tactics to dispossessed and deprived communities here in LA to manage violence and to apply violence yourselves instead of fighting against violence the way you're saying. So what we want and what we demand is, in addition to shutting this shit down, we want reparations for all the people harmed. And we want all of these to have jobs afterwards, the police departments to exist, but the reparations were not large enough.
Yeah, right.
My name is Mimi. I'm with the Stop LAPD Spy Coalition. The first thing I want to say is framing the community feedback as concerns is really disingenuous. What the community did was completely reject the program. These aren't concerns, they're rejecting the programs. Also, it's rather remarkable. You had 819 responses and not one spoke out in favor of these programs. The community is completely unified in its opposition to the programs. You also got to know that many of these people are people who are concerned about giving their info
to when they signed this, because they don't trust you, they don't trust the LAPD, yet they did it. If you're going to listen to those people, to the community who express their opposition, you have a lot more integrity if you just say fuck you to the community, because that's what you're doing. So for once in your fucking lives, would you listen to the community and shut it down? Shut it down!
Josh Mayer, followed by Charlotte Neary Bremer, Akua Again, and Jeremy Levinson.
Thank you. My name is Josh Mayer. I'm a PhD student in anthropology at UCLA. And I'm here as one of the signatories to the letter that Commissioner Bonner mentioned, which is designed to dispel the idea frequently mentioned by Chief Moore that there is widespread academic support for these programs that are being discussed today. And so I'd like to read from that letter. To the extent that Professor Jeffrey Bantingham and his UCLA colleagues represent an academic stamp of approval of predictive policing and other algorithm-based models that either methods for Chief Moore, we wish to make it very clear there is not universal agreement or acceptance of the empirical merits and the ethics of their research at UCLA in anthropology as a discipline or in other disciplines. On the contrary, many anthropologists and other scholars who read his scholarship believe it represents some of the most troubling legacies of the discipline of anthropology and of social science more generally. Among our concerns, which we can share in more detail, are first, whether the research meets the ethical obligation outlined in our anthropological code of ethics to ensure our research does not harm our research subject. And second, how the quantitative approach to the research naturalizes policies and practices that have had disparate impacts on Black and brown communities. If this police commission is interested in the position of the Academy and UCLA anthropology in particular on predatory and predictive policing, please say to us today from Chief Moore and Deputy Chief Malinowski that there's just a fundamental misunderstanding about what this letter is speaking about. It is not about monetizing these products. That does raise issues of conflicts of interest within the university and by Professor Bantingham when he's evaluating his own programs, which clearly cannot be doing in an unbiased way. But it's also about the ethics of the research, as the letter says. It's about grave methodological problems that nationalize racist practices and the data that results from those practices. And it's about, and as I said, it's about these conflicts of interest. We've seen at Ohio State University and Duke massive conflicts of interest where university administrations have overlooked bad data in order to earn money for the university.
UCLA as well. As Josh said, it's not just a conflict of interest of the person who's producing the product, also evaluating the product. There are many other academic concerns about predictive policing, location-based policing, or precision policing. Kathy O'Neill, who is a Harvard-trained mathematician, data scientist, and has worked as a professor and hedge fund analyst, provided this statement. Provision policing is stipulated on the assumption that we have crime data. We don't. Instead, we have arrest data and reported crime data, both of which are poor proxies for crime. Most crimes are not reported, and most crimes do not lead to an arrest. So we are working with a massively flawed data set, with a lot of missing data. And that missing data is not equally distributed. For drug crimes, certain profiled people in neighbourhoods, specifically poor, Black neighbourhoods, are much more likely to be scrutinised for criminal behaviour, and thus more likely to end up arrested. The algorithms, of course, don't know about the missing data. They are going with incomplete data, thinking it's a perfect representation of crime. And in particular, they look for hotspots for crime and send police to places that produce crime, i.e. arrests, which then predict and produce more crime. When you consider unequal missing data problem, we see a feedback loop. The places that have data get more data, and the places that have missing data will continue to miss data because the police are not sent there. So as you can see, there is not wholehearted scientific stamp of approval on this type of policing practice. And there's a huge debate going on in academia, which I don't think has been fully reviewed by the teams who provided you with the information earlier.
Wow, thank you.
My name is Olivia Hudson, and I'm also a graduate student at UCLA. Today I'll be reading comments by Professors Jeffrey and Bernard Markland of Columbia University. There's deep academic criticism of the
predictive policing software that the LAPD is considering. Rather than predict crime, these tools predict policing, establishing its errors and biases of the most heavily policed communities. As such, PredPol replicates rather than corrects for racial inequalities and inefficiencies of policing. Tools like PredPol, in essence, multiply patterns of policing errors and biases while offering only minimal gains for public safety. It is nearly impossible to scrub race from predicted analytics, given its dependence on historically biased data. The recent detailed audit by LAPD Inspector General Smith sounds an alarm about the negative effects of predictive policing on crime reporting at police stations and at the edges of crime zones, further weakening the public safety returns from policing. These authors detail many of their concerns about predictive policing in their research.
Thank you. Morning.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy Levinson. I'm another PhD student from UCLA. I'm here to read portions of a 5-page testimony that was submitted last night by Sunita Patel, Curtis Skinner, and Alicia Virani, all from UCLA School of Law. Sunita Patel is an assistant professor of law and faculty director of the Veteran Legal Clinic, and she teaches civil rights and police litigation. So their testimony reflects their views and not any position on behalf of the entire school. So they write, we respectfully submit the following testimony regarding predictive policing in Los Angeles. The LAPD uses two types of place-based predictive policing, which we find deeply unsettling and worth halting. PredPol and Los Angeles and Laser, these programs use prior crime and arrest data by geographic area to provide officers with key maps or hotspots. Police departments make patrol decisions based on such data. PredPol focuses on vehicle-related crimes while Laser focuses on gun-related crimes. Our math wash or check wash racial profiling. B, flawed data should not be used as a basis to predict criminal activity. And C, predictive policing runs against the general trend in Los Angeles County of non-punitive approaches to crime prevention and the general acceptance that individuals can and do rehabilitate. I'm just going to skip to their conclusion. Given the strong concerns raised by the public, the Office of Inspector General and others, we counsel the Commission to eliminate the use of PredPol and study the consequences of eliminating Operation Laser. With the many law enforcement investigative tools available to the LAPD, it should abandon ones lacking public support and criticize for sweeping countless individuals into harmful policing dragnets. The Commission's role is one of oversight. The Commission can no longer ignore the pressing concerns that new era predictive policing only reinforces the same sorts of racially biased policing that have plagued Black and Latinx communities since the dawn of modern policing. Thank you.
Jessica Catalino, Dr. Jemima Pierre, and Jody Schofield.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Jessica Catalino. I'm an associate professor of anthropology at UCLA, and I've published on police. UCLA anthropologists co-organized an international symposium on racialized state violence in global perspective. We heard from experts and about persistent patterns of racialized state violence in societies that include our own. At that event and beyond, one thing is clear as a bell. There is no academic consensus in favor of predictive policing. Indeed, there's extensive criticism in the scholarly literature, in law, mathematics, and social sciences, for example. Criticism for reasons that include the tendency of predictive policing to harden the biases that characterize not only policing, but our other institutions in our society, and indeed to expand those biases through, for example, increased arrests. This morning, the academic literature has been invoked, but the scope of literature that's been cited is inadequate. And even the study by the National Academy of Sciences that was mentioned expresses concern in its very title of its own press release that, quote, there is insufficient evidence on role of racial bias, end quote. The chair of that study said, quote, the committee felt that the lack of data on the role of racial bias in proactive policing was startling, and that it's critically important that we understand not simply the impacts of proactive policing on racial outcomes, but also how race may impact the adoption of specific types of proactive policing, end quote. I refer you to the Inspector General report, page 26, which cites two published studies that evaluate predictive policing. Please see footnote number 36 which lists the titles of these publications and the journals in which they were published, but not the author. The author of those published studies that evaluate PredPol was my colleague Jeff Brantingham, who is also chief of R&D at PredPol. I welcome the application of scholars' research to pressing social issues, but it shouldn't be evaluated by the American public about
Is this letter available on the website? Or, I mean, you distribute it to us, we'll put it out, but are you gonna put it out on your website for people here who have?
You can check the coalition's Medium page also, Steve.
It's gonna be on the website, on the Medium page, so let's move on.
It is. It is. Wrap it up.
Hands up, overall.
Let the professor speak.
Follow us on that.
My name is Dr. Jemima Pierre, and I am an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology and the Department of African American Studies at UCLA. I'm here to express my concern about the LAPD's intentions to deploy predictive policing technologies. One of the claims is that the deployment of PredPol is that its positive effects are consistent with academic literature. I would like to challenge this claim by saying what is more consistent with the academic literature is how significant race is for the U.S. and how it shapes where we live, where we go to school, how much we are policed or how we are not policed. I'd like to make 3 specific points concerning about PredPol concerning race, ethics, and profits. First, regarding race, PredPol is said to depend on historic crime data. However, what constitutes crime? How would PredPol determine white-collar violence or domestic violence? How is it that this crime always seems to point to communities living in racially segregated and over-policed micro hotspots? Second, regarding ethics, how is it that the city is willing to dispense funds towards private venture by a UCLA professor that ends up increasing police presence in over-policed Black and brown communities when members of these Black and brown communities are underrepresented at UCLA? Community that cannot access UCLA. Third, regarding profits, PredPol is a for-profit company whose raw material is poor Black and brown people. We are not just talking about surveillance, we are talking about extraction and dividends paid to a white scholar and a white company for the transformation of Black and brown communities into data for profit. PredPol's activities are based in racist assumptions about crime and communities of color, unethical and immoral treatment of members of the LA community, and finally, white profits from Black and brown bodies. It's a predatory policing program that should be dismissed and disbanded.
Yeah.
Good morning. I've stood here many times and listened to you guys for the last 3 years. And Mr. Silverhoff. You guys are talking about building trust with the community. How can we trust you if you're killing us? I am a student at UCLA. I'm a graduate student. I'm a PhD in social welfare. One of my jobs is to look into Twin Towers and look at the results of what you guys are doing. It's ridiculous. Predictive policing needs to be shut down. We can predict policing as it stands. Policing is predictable in that it will kill Black and brown members of these communities. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down.
Courtney Eccles, Hamid Khan, and James Garcia.
So I'm with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and I'm also a PhD student in Criminology Law and Society at UC Irvine. Okay. And I just want to address a few things regarding the science on these programs, since Moore loves to tout research and academic literature. Let me stress a point that I alluded to earlier. The only 2 known empirical studies assessing predictive policing, where the researcher was not monetarily invested in a particular outcome of the study, found that predictive policing programs increased enforcement, but actually had little impact on the reduction of crime. And then regarding precision policing, just a few things that the LAPD won't tell you, and the reason why more than I answer the question regarding the academic literature on precision policing is because there is no academic literature on precision policing, and there is no scientific independent evidence supporting this strategy. And in fact, To this point, precision policing was created by Bill Bratton and first implemented during his stint as NYPD Police Commissioner in 2014. And he was also the former Chief of Police of LAPD and is now working with the LAPD to implement it here. One, that's what criminologists would refer to as a conflict of interest. Second, precision policing emerged in New York City in response to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations around the murder of Eric Garner. Third, it emphasizes even more data collection and surveillance and under the guise of community policing. Four, according to the NAACP, who by the way filed a lawsuit in New York around precision policing, and I quote, disguised as precision policing, the NYPD executes military-style gang takedowns that target low-income communities of color across New York City. Prior to executing these mass arrests, the NYPD conducts criminal investigations relying in part on a secret database that designates thousands of New Yorkers as members of gangs or street crews with limited due process protections. 99% of the individuals in the NYPD's gang database are people of color, end quote. Sounds a whole hell of a lot like the list.
Let's be clear, LAPD is not expanding the chronic offender program, it's simply continuing the harm it has always inflicted on Black and brown communities, now under the guise of precision policing. That's right. No, I'm not done, shut up. And lastly, I also just want
No, Moore got the mic for like a freaking hour.
I'm going to uplift the names of people that were murdered by kids that were murdered by LAPD in laser zones as a
So
result
I'm
of
gonna ask you to leave the
and this is
meeting
good.
or I'm going to recess the meeting.
Kenny Watkins, Cornell Snow,
Are you going to leave or are we going to recess?
what do we say to precision policing?
Shut it down!
Say to precision policing!
Shut it down!
Go ahead, sister.
Ain't no power like the power of the people.
Senate Speaker Hamid Khan, followed by Judy Garcia.
So, a lot has been already said, so let's talk about the spend
She needs to leave the meeting. I've asked her to leave the meeting.
Oh, wow, wow, you really
That's what this is.
Guys, back up.
Wait,
Back
what?
up, back up.
Someone does need to walk with her out. Somebody needs to walk with her out.
Authoritarian police.
It's on camera, y'all. It's on local news. That's right. It's on the local news.
She got that part very right.
So, a lot has been said, and of course, if they have even this much of shame, even this much of shame, they will shut it down. But of course, they're shameless. We know where they come from. That's right. Well, let's talk about how the meeting started off with this guy, Mr. Frankenstein himself, Mark Smith. He starts casting a doubt and making a mockery about people's response. Right. I wonder when people get things on ballot, and they come from the same source and they gather signatures, if he'll have the audacity to tell the state assembly that fuck, it's coming from the same source, it's identical. I wonder when people sign petitions and get thousands of signatures coming from the same source, if he'll have the fucking audacity to come back and say this is identical. But it's only when people are speaking out about this motherfucking department that this asshole has to come back and say it's coming from the identical sources. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame. And let's go to what the chief has been saying about how you sanitize all this bullshit that we talk about. It's always evolving. This fucking place has been evolving since 1869. For the last 150 years, this goddamn department has been evolving. It was evolving, and this guy, Arcos, talks about much better design. Weed and Seed was a much better design. Operation Hammer was a much better design. Broken Windows was much better design. Suspicious activity reporting was much better design. Predictive policing is much better design. That's their fucking design that they talk about. But they don't have the audacity to seek the truth. You're not going to stay on this commission we're telling you, Deomano. They're going to kick your ass out. Because you're asking questions. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to be a rubber stamping body. You're supposed to be a rubber stamping body. But if you have any shame, what all of the academics, all of the folks have said is that this is fundamentally flawed by design. You can twist it, you can give it a different name, you can do whatever, it'll still bring up the same results. It's still going to quarantine black and brown bodies, it's still about land, it's about expropriating bodies, it's about displacing people. So if you have any shame, shut the goddamn thing.
Shut it down! Followed by Clint Blakely, Kai Usumi, and Elizabeth Parks Kibbe.
So let's take it back to 2016, Gladys and Sixth at LA Can, where folks like Craig, Eddie H., Lydia Trejo, Kay Utsumi, where we sat together and we said predictive policing. So this is the new spin. But this isn't just about predictive policing. Well, one thing I want to step back is that that group of people, we built this power. We built this power to challenge you all. We built predictive policing. This isn't just about shutting down predictive policing. This is about shutting down policing.
That's right.
And more, you raised the question, and I saw that. You wanted to legitimize your presence in the community. You want to legitimize that you are the one that provides safety. And what you're realizing right now and what we're seeing is that you're realizing that that legitimacy is crumbling.
Yes. Right.
It's crumbling.
Right. Yes.
And people are asking different questions.
Yes.
People are imagining different things.
Yes.
And we have academics here, we have, countless other people here that are giving you facts about predictive policing. But again, it's not just about predictive policing, because when we shut it down, and we do shut down predictive policing, we will not be shut down.
That's right.
We will be here the next day, after the next day, until policing nationwide, countrywide is shut down. We don't want policing anymore. And then you wanted pragmatic solutions. You wanted rational solutions, because apparently we are all here and we're irrational because we're challenging policing, because this is about policing. Rational solutions, they're right here. We have them all. More hospitals, more schools, more housing, more food. Those are the things that we want. And those are the things that you protect. We talked about real estate. We talked about land. Those are the things that you protect.
That's
We
right.
don't want those things protected anymore. We want our
The next speaker,
resources.
please, for
You are
mic
being
me.
questioned. Your legitimacy is being questioned. This is about policing.
Thank you.
This is about
Next speaker,
anti-policing. We will not stop
Please,
until it's
speaker,
all over.
please
We
stop
will
and
not
come back
stop
on another
until it's
public
all
comment.
shut down.
That's right. That's right. Shut it down.
Alright, so I want to start my comment by asking a question actually to the commission. So we've heard a lot about
Microphone. Turn on his mic.
All right.
Let's start the clock again.
Alright, so I want to ask a question to the commission about one packet that was not available back there. We've heard a lot about the 819 emails that the commission received in the past 2 weeks, not one of which expressed support for data-driven policing. Why was that packet, which was posted online, not available in physical form back there?
They're not going to respond to you.
No reason? Okay. Well, I mean, that was we had a 26-page packet that was the Inspector General's report from. I find it surprising that he didn't include it because it was a searing indictment of racist LAPD practices. So I'm calling you to include all the literature in physical form back there. All right. When a policy is rotten at its core, no amount of amendments or reform can set it straight. The laser and predpol programs are rotten at their core. They are symptoms of white supremacy and will only result in the intimidation, incarceration, and murder of black and brown folks. These programs are not supported by academic research, as we've heard, and their racial bias will not be removed by reform. You can reduce the area of these hotspots, make them micro hotspots, but they will still be located in over-policed black and brown neighborhoods and will not change the over-policing of these neighborhoods. To use Chief Moore's words, I want to call on you all to absolutely throw the baby out with the bathwater if it is a racist, rotten, and murderous baby. And pretzel and laser, shut it down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Predictive policing, laser is flawed from the beginning. Shut it down. Why? Because it was conceived and promoted and put into effect by the LAPD itself without outside community input. So it's all authoritarian LAPD that goes back to, like the man said, it goes back to the 1800s. But in my limited knowledge, I only know about the racist Chief Parker. Chief Parker was a white supremacist racist to the core that they named his police station after. What? And then Daryl Gates, the racist, racist, and this LAPD still has a whole lot, it retains a lot of that racism. That racism resulted in a lot of protests. Also, the Watts Rebellion, 1968. Okay, there was a rebellion against the LAPD and other things like white supremacists and looking down at poor black and white people. And the LA Rebellion of 1992 also was a racist, against racist policing, and that policing still continues. I have talked to black women who told me how the police treated black during all in the occupation, and that kind of treatment still continues today. Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Elizabeth Parks Kibbe, followed by Paula Miner, Tina Krenko, and General Jeff.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Parks Kibbe. I'm a lifelong Los Angeles resident. I am here because I care about the people of Los Angeles. I care about the police of Los Angeles, and I care enough to shut this down. I cannot speak to what it means to be part of a black and brown community that is systemically criminalized. What I can speak of is my own experience. I've tried lifting up data from other points, and it's usually unsuccessful in these forums, so I'll try a different tack. I went to private school in Los Angeles. I was the victim of many crimes that went underreported, not unreported, but underreported and absolutely unpoliced. Chief Moore, are you listening? I went on after NYU to become a civilian investigator for the Civilian Complaint Review Board in New York. I care very much about policing, and I see the necessity for it in our communities. I then became a public educator, a mother, and a local Los Angeles business owner in that order. I have even personal ties to people on this commission for whom I have compassion, because I know what it means to be a bureaucrat who is challenged by systems that were designed to hurt people and are difficult to reform. I would like to answer, well, there's several points that I would like to make. First of all, I drove over an hour to be here today. I suggest to many of you in this crowd, policemen, officers, chief, commissioners, and members of the public, to listen to the academics and also a podcast, which is easier to digest than a dissertation, sir, by a podcast called Data Skeptic. The date is June 23rd, 2016. It features Christian Loom, who is the lead statistician of the Human Rights.
You can come back during public comment. We have more public comment, and you can fill out a card, and then come back and then. Thank you.
I'll send a letter. Thank you.
Okay.
Mighty white.
that compassion. I definitely feel a face.
I hope you appreciate the fact that we did have comments today from the academic community, because we know the commission, particularly Mr. Soberall, demeans the group of people that come every week, demeans Stop LAPD Spying, that does research, that does work, that has said most of what's been said today for years, absolutely for years.
Yes.
The words that we hear today are words that are associated with LAPD, a flawed system, racial bias, lack of transparency. You know, Black Lives Matter comes here and uses those same terms when we're talking about officer-involved shootings. But these terms also are applied when we talk about policing.
I'm not positive, but
whether it's smart policing,
sorry.
predictive policing, or what the young lady said, predatory policing. I hope this commission listens. It's so important From Black Lives Matter perspective, we think predpol should be stopped.
Yes.
We know how it ends up. We know who is mostly suffering from these efforts. We know where those hot spots are. When I looked at one of the recommendations that Chief Moore made about if people call 911, then after their call, someone will call and try to present them with a survey to talk about how did you like what happened. Give us your comments on what happened. When a person calls 911, you know that is absolutely the very last thing they want to do. You know that they are extremely desperate and do not want to be surveyed to find out if your predicting policing policy was good or bad. So again, I join with my colleagues, I join with academia to say shut it down. We know what happens. The next step will be adding more to officer-involved shootings like Kenny Ross, Keith Versick, who are all
Back to
in
public
hot
comment.
spots.
Jeff?
So I say shut it down.
Shut it down!
Hi, my name is Tina. I just wanted to draw our attention one more time to the OIG report because I think the language of it is really important. Specifically, the motives behind laser and the choice of the word laser as the title of the program. The basic premise, this is page 4 of the OIG report. The basic premise is to target with laser-like precision the violent repeat offenders and gang members who commit crimes in the specific target areas. The program is analogous to laser surgery, where a trained medical doctor uses modern technology to remove tumors and improve eyesight. Later on it says, plans are then developed to remove offenders from the area with minimal invasiveness and minimal harm to the people in the areas around them. This is a mandate for murder, and let me explain why. Chief Moore, you mentioned earlier that you have an interest in building, quote, a relationship-building posture with the community. And when you create a program and sustain a program divesting public funds away from education, away from affordable housing, away from programs that people actually need, you create a situation in which you arm already nervous officers. And I'm looking at the officers who are lining this room. People who are already have their heart rates up because they're confronting situations that are already high stakes. And you give them financially biased, unsubstantiable pseudoscience to justify violent interventions in communities of color. And did help and healing and not assaultable bullets, which is what he ultimately got. So I don't understand how any of you can sit there comfortably knowing that the consequence of a program like this is a bullet hitting someone's body. People's lives are at stake here. We're not just talking about watching people, we're talking about people's lives.
Good morning, my name is General Jeff, Skid Row and Crenshaw District. Bonner Bender. As far as, another presentation, last time it was some inexperienced representatives, and now you got LAPD brass. It's still the same thing. It's extremely vague. There's no depth. There's no substance. It's just we're pretending like it's something new. LAPD this is not nothing new. LAPD's been using data for decades. Let's take for instance in the 80s. Everybody remember the battle round? That was when it was crack houses and dope houses all throughout the hood. And LAPD, identified, located, and generated all the data, and then ran the battle round up into people's houses. Sometimes the wrong houses, but it was data back then. So it's the same stuff here. 2 + 2 is 4. And all this report is saying we're going to substitute the first 2 with the second 2. And then we're going to switch the second 2 with the first 2. All we're saying is it's still 2 + 2 is 4. It's still the same fucking math. Nothing new. What the hell are y'all presenting to the people to try to justify it? There's absolutely nothing there. And so, we appreciate the fact that the new commissioners are demanding more information from the department, because they're not just going to sign off on something that's basically just going to put bullseyes on the backs of blacks and brown kids and families all throughout this city. When we look at, when they talk about location-based policing, I'm concerned. I'm a Skid Row community activist. Are you saying location? Because Skid Row is going to be policed different from the San Fernando Valley. It's going to be policed different from South Central Los Angeles. What does that even mean? When you talk about precision, what precision are you talking about? Because with 4 million people in this city and 10,000 officers, the core principle of LAPD has always been uphold the law through intimidation and fear tactics. So how in the hell are you going to focus on terms of talking about building trust through public safety when you intimidating and fearing people, causing trauma? It doesn't work.
George Mazzetti, Erica Ferriston, and I am Jameson.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So we're supposed to have law enforcement here, huh? So yesterday I go up online, and for the first time your agenda's missing, sober awful, idiots, lawbreakers. Are you familiar with AB 2257, all you idiots, so-called lawbreakers, and Orwellian, opposite of protect to serve, reverence for the law, quality, respect, service, and integrity? This is an illegal meeting! And to make sure you know that, I have my official letter here, so all of you know that they have to respond in 30 days.
Mr. President,
anything that happens here is out of order.
Call in conference, please.
This is on topic. This is your OIG who's supposed to pay attention to this stuff, dummy. Don't you follow the law, OIG? Are you sober up? Because your secretary yesterday told me all I got to do is put it out there, and Mr. Herman went checking there's only 3 copies. Shut up!
Disrupting the meeting.
I'm not disrupting the meeting. Okay, I'll sit down. Now you can't throw me out, fool. And here's the shit to prove it.
Erica Ferriston.
That's what y'all
Oh,
drive.
I abuse the paper.
That's what you drive people to do, Fame.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Erica Ferriston. This is my first time at a police commission hearing. I think you can probably gather, since I'm coming from the community, I'm going to have the same line as every single other member in this community has had, which is basically shut it down. I come from the west side, from Brentwood. I think if you look out, you'll see you've got young people, old people, students, white people, black people, brown people. We are the community, and I love all these quotes up here. And it says, in service to our communities. I'm telling you, as a representative from the west side, we want this shut down. While there are claims that this is unbiased, precision policing is just the latest version, iteration of historical racist policing tactics that seek to control, contain, incarcerate, and displace people.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'll speak for myself, I really appreciate you, Mr. Bonner, for all the questions that you've asked. I really think that you are sitting here and listening, and I hope that all of you are really listening to the community that we are supposed to be serving here. We don't want this. And I also invite, every Wednesday for over a year, people in this community have been gathering and forming a circle of support for the family members whose children, whose loved ones have been killed by law enforcement. You don't need papers and studies. Over 512 people in 5 years have been killed by law enforcement in Los Angeles County. This isn't working. Please continue to do the work to investigate on your own the truth and shut it down.
Shut it down!
So the UCLA academics have done a masterful job of dispelling the myth that anyone in academia thinks that predictive policing works. I would just like to make a general statement about the state of policing in 2019 and the use of data. Prior to last year, with the passage of SB 1421 and AB 748, which allowed Californians to access law enforcement officer personnel records and to get body cam footage of critical incidents released within 45 days of the critical incidents. We didn't have access to any of that. We do not have a national registry for people who are killed by law enforcement, which is why we get those statistics aggregated by newspapers like The Guardian. I just want to repeat, our federal government does not require law enforcement agencies to report how many people they kill. So you guys have this mountain of data on us based on racial profiling and based on over-enforcement of low-level offenses. You have all of that data with which to police us to death, literally to death. And we don't know shit about you. And it should be the other way around because you menace our constitutional rights and you have the power to kill us. So we are going to continue to demand transparency, and we are going to continue to demand that you shut down this wholly ineffective, universally reviled, fucking awful program. Shut it down.
Shut it down.
The next speaker, Reverend, followed by Jonathan Foster and Reverend Dr. Mello Desire.
Another preacher in the building, that's always good to know. Quickly, there were two violent acts, I think, that happened. I don't have to go over all the facts. I'm glad the facts are already talked about. I want to talk about the violent acts that happened. One, Soberall, your racist ass hurt this person talking to you about his own mental health journey. He was telling you his own mental health journey. And you missed it. You know how hard it is for someone traveling and suffering with mental health to stand anywhere to talk to anybody? And you would do that to him? And you want to give more resources to police to interact with these type of communities? You missed it. The second violent act is Bonner. They're going to come for you. You are black, and I think you realize you are black situated in white liberalism.
Yeah.
I think you saw that, and I think it scared you. When the chief busted his shoulders up in front of you, you weren't a black liberal anymore. And be careful. This white lady sitting next to you have the audacity in front of cameras. Tell them, go find facts. Go write up facts. Something's gotta, substantiate this. Go make it up. That's a former prosecutor.
Right. That's the way it is.
Effortlessly. Take that and go fuck yourself with it.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster. I acknowledge the 98% excellent service and 2% that's gross, and that's about all we can talk about is what's gross. And so the old chronic offender program was a spiral notebook. I mean, they took that, two officers would talk about what they had written down. That's still got problems. Where is the possibility for a person to grow and change, and where's the forgiveness in a repair if they're getting constantly beat down? However, the improper use of a repeat offender program has every problem you've been cracked for. A public service done in private. To know things about the public, the citizen has to sue. They have to spend money and enrich a judge who gets 90% of his salary in retirement to find out information that should be all public, or to in programs that you or I or us would think and feel that the police wouldn't have anything to do with. Without a lawsuit, we're going to continue with programs. They were going to continue with these programs without a lawsuit, are detracting from the value of police, what they can be, what their role truly is. These programs have harmed potential public trust and the good name of the LAPD. Goldsmith, got your head down about the root causes of crime is right next to you, the dude that doesn't pay anybody. People subscribing to someone else a low wage, and then people are left with less than they need. And then hitting children throughout their life and speaking belittlement to the child also causes some people to be involved in crime. And Jesus said that would be a great thing, is taking Jesus out of here is the root cause of crime. Goldsmith, you wouldn't know anything about that. So making people in the United States of America pay for a temple in Israel so they can chop off a bull's head is what the problem is.
My name is Reverend Dr. Bello Desire, and born and raised in Watts, but more importantly, dealing with the disenfranchised. They said enough already. I'm not going to repeat how predictive programming sucks. They've been telling us that we've been 11% of the population, but 54% of the crimes. And who are the ones that do the statistics? Are humans. So when you keep feeding data and you don't have any foundation for that data, it's the same Census Bureau people who also smoke weed and knock on the doors, and when they're tired, they miss about 1 million black people for the census. This is 2010, and now we're in 2019, so we're still supposed to believe the same data. Our goal is to work with the department and to help improve communication between relationships, work towards changing the culture and dialogue between LAPD and the inner city. We want to know about your new programs and your goals for the department, as well as how helping to stop gang violence, help you help our kids. The last thing you said, Soberov, is that you want to help. So Arias Ashtagon, who was our leader, who was everything, things that Margaret Thomas and Teddy, who stood behind you, were crocodile tears, saying how saddened we are of his death, but they did not put our tax money where it's supposed to be. He took his $1 million and he was too strong. He didn't sign a deal, so he was too strong. Without government help, so you had to take him out. So you hired Eric Holder to take him out. I just want to work with you, Soberov, to complete what you said in the press release April 3rd. If you're really about gang violence, then the emails that Mark Riley Thomas and his pit bull Kathleen Austria denied, we asked for $10,000 in the resource center since 2010. And we can believe anything you say.
Anyone know the comment cards on the side, please?
What I'll do is go over the action step, what amendments there would be subject to quarterly reporting, information sharing.
There were a number of things suggested. I hope I was not responsible for keeping track of all of them, but they certainly included, if there were any replacement of an offender-based program, that it would come before the commission before enactment, that the academic or external review of these programs include and address the original questions we asked the Inspector General to address. If that's not possible, that the Inspector General address them in a separate report, and that he review any reports produced on the Tax Commission as well. That the manual be brought to the subcommittee for review before implementation. What else do you have? And the community, I appreciated the dialogue about the community surveys, and that when we're understanding, this is Commissioner Bonner's contribution, when we're understanding the impact that these programs have on communities, that they include the impact on trust and the impact on other people who may have been swept up in this process, or other innocent people, and that the community surveys in particular target the communities that are most directly impacted by these policing strategies to understand their perception and the impact that it's having on them. Commissioner Bonner, were there additional things, and I believe Commissioner.
I think my questions at this point are maybe procedural reports. I'm at see the agenda or call the question as to whether we should be approving the department's report, which I'm not in a position to do today. That's what we're asking for. So that's really the clarification I think that we need as to whether the sense of the commission is to receive additional information and input and then reconsider the report, or whether it's the intention to vote on the report as it is today.
Commissioner Goldsmith, I did ask for the department to work with the subcommittee to provide additional information regarding the data. Both that supports the effectiveness of the crime fighting program that they have put forward, as well as indicating how they're going to measure its effectiveness to the community and lack of disparate treatment.
I'm going to move to recommend for the board's action, the approval of the Inspector General's report, number 2, to